Alrighty guys, what's going on? So today in this video, we're going to talk about big worms. My favorite colors, where I like to fish them, my favorite rigs for them, my favorite baits. So we're going to go run ahead and get into it. So if I look dirty, you guys can see my hands, I'm kind of got a lot of black specks and stuff on me. I actually just got done splitting 2 giant trailer loads full of wood, so that's probably why. So yeah, that's why. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get into this. So I pulled out some of my stuff, some of my baits, some of my rod and reels and rigs that I like to throw these bigger baits on, and figured I'd go ahead and throw this video together. So, the 2 favorite baits that I've been throwing here lately, obviously, I got my own lure company. I'm going to have to, go with my baits. Because they're also my company, and I've just been catching fish on them. If you guys follow my Facebook, just today on the green pumpkin? I think it was green pumpkin. I can't honestly remember, but I think it was green pumpkin. I caught 2 bass throwing it on the rig I'm going to show you here in a second. I think I got the same worm rigged up there on it already. But green pumpkin, slammer worm, or the paddle tail. These are both 8-inch baits. Now this goes for anybody if you're throwing 13, 10, 12, whatever size worm you're throwing or whatever size worm you have. This goes for that as well. Now, an 8-inch worm is perfect worm for me, for my area, because a 2-pounder or even a 1-pounder will eat it, and then some of the bigger fish will also eat it. So we're going to also cover some of you guys that throw spinning rods only. Some of you guys like the Fly Fishing Ninja, he doesn't use bait casters, he uses spinning rods. So I wanted to include this little part in it as well, because I used to be the same way. I used to only be able to throw spinning gear. So I'm going to go ahead and talk to you guys about how I like to throw my big worms on spinning gear. Now this here is my personal spinning rod that I use for finesse fishing, the big worms and all that kind of stuff. This one here is a white Abu Garcia Never Give Up Mike Iaconelli rod and reel. I've got 8-pound Berkley Trilene on here. Now if you're going with a big worm, don't go under 8-pound line. Just don't. It's honestly, it's going to do you more harm than good, because what I've found is when you go on lighter line, you usually hook up with the bigger fish. I've just had it happen too many times. I broke off one fish. When was that? I think it was like the only fish I broke off in the 2 years that I've bass fished, and it was a big one. I'm going to guess it was probably close to 6 pounds. And I was using a spinning rod with light line. I was using 8-pound line. This is the same line. But I was using 8-pound line, and I hooked the fish, and it got me around a dock, and just pop, line went pop like that, and there went that big bass. And thankfully I was only using just a weightless trick worm, so it wasn't like I broke off, a $4 or $5 crankbait or something like that. It was just a plain hook and a worm. That's all it was. But don't go under 8-pound line, just because it's just not smart. Now 8-pound Berkley Trilene, that's what I always throw. That's what's on the other rod as well, is Berkley Trilene. I've got 8-pound on this one. I got 12-pound on the other one. So if you're throwing a spinning rod, don't go to 12-pound. It's a little bit heavier. It will reduce your casting quite a bit. And if you're going to throw finesse baits like this, or if you're going to throw big worms, don't go straight braid. Straight braid will hurt your catch rate, because the fish can see the braid a little bit easier. Go with either monofilament or fluorocarbon. Now, personally, I like throwing big worms when I'm throwing a spinning rod. I like throwing them on a shaky head. Let me go ahead and unravel this. Try not to hit the ceiling fan. So this one here is a Doc's Lure Company slammer worm in the crystal clear shad color. This one is crystal clear plastic with blue and silver flake in the plastic. It's basically just clear plastic with blue silver flakes. That's it. This color here has actually caught quite a few as well. Not only in this color, but also, or not only in this bait, but also in the dragon worm as well. But this one here is the 8-inch. If I can not drop it. Oh, there's a ceiling fan. Yep, I'm going to have to check the line after that one. But 8-inch slammer worm with a 3/8 ounce shaky head. So I've actually got the packaging for the shaky head right over here, and I'll show it to you real quick so y'all can see it. and see what it is that I always throw. This is the shaky head that I always throw. This is the Lucky Strike Finesse Football Head. Now these here are 1/4 ounce. That one there is actually a 3/8 ounce. What I usually do is I don't go up to 1/2 ounce if I don't have to, especially with light line like that. If I'm going with lighter line, I'll go with either 1/8 or a 3/8, 1/4, or an 1/8 ounce. Now, if you're throwing bigger worms like this, don't go with an 1/8 ounce. It's just too small. But what you can do is when you can get away with like the 3/8 ounce or the 1/4, is the worm itself is heavy. I mean, this is a pretty big chunk of plastic paired with this little head. It has a pretty good weight to it. And that's a good thing. That maximizes your cast distance. That maximizes your sink rate. And the sink rate is key because you always want your bait to fall fast. Now, depending on the one you're using, I mean, if you're using like a little wacky rig stick bait or something like that, you don't want it to be fast. But if you're throwing something on the bottom, you want it to fall fast. Another key is, go lay down, cat. Go down. Sorry about that. But the key with these bigger worms when you're throwing shaky heads or Tex rig or any rig that you're throwing these baits on is bottom contact. You always want to be in contact with the bottom. Now, if you can sit there and you can drag your rod tip really slowly along and you can feel just the little subtle taps of the bottom, that's when you know you're doing your retrieve right. If you don't feel that, it's either a smooth bottom or you're up in the water column and you're not on the bottom and you want to let it sink a little bit. Why is the bottom contact so important? It's important because in the summertime when you're deep water fishing, you're trying to catch those bass that are set on the bottom. Now, when a bass is out in the deeper water, especially during the middle of the day, you guys may have seen the fish that I caught on Facebook. They were in the middle of the day, like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Like most people wouldn't even be fishing at that time. I am. When these big worms are with these big worms, you can catch them any time of the day. You can catch them in evening, nighttime. A lot of people like using these big worms in like a dark color, like a black, like this one here. A lot of people like throwing dark colors at night, and they catch some big fish. I've seen people catch some giant fish. I'm talking 10 plus pounds at night, throwing dark colored worms on the bottom really slow. Now, the flip side to it is when you're out there and the fish are slow and they're on the bottom in the wintertime, you want to do the exact same thing. It's no different from the summertime. You want to be super slow, methodical with your cast. You want to know exactly where you casted. You want to know exactly what your bottom's like. Now, if you're going to a new lake, like I've been to new lakes and I've only fished big worms, and the reason why is because it was the middle of the day. It was summertime. I want to say it was August. I went to a brand new lake. It's literally the only lake around here within probably 100 miles that has actual trout in it, like good sized trout. And I went and I threw a green pumpkin worm, sort of like this, 8-inch, on a 1/2 ounce Texas rig, 50-pound braid. And that was back when I used to throw 50-pound braid almost all the time with bottom baits. Now I'm a little bit more wise to throwing braid. I get a lot more bites than I used to with braid. But anyway, I used to just take it and cast straight out in the middle, let it sink all the way down, and keep it on the bottom as much as possible. And I caught one fish, and it was probably about that long. It's probably maybe a 10-incher, and then I lost about a 10-incher. And that was the only bites I got that whole day, but I had a whole bunch more little grabs. They weren't eating it, but they were biting at it. And that told me that there were a lot of smaller fish in that lake, and we haven't been back there since. Now, it could have just been a little bitty trout messing with it, or bluegill or something, possibly, but I doubt it, just because it was way out in probably 12 feet of water, and I don't really think trout are deep water fish. I'm pretty sure they're up in the shallows a lot. But I might be wrong. Somebody will probably correct me on that. But yeah, bottom contact is a huge part of throwing these big worms. You'll see me a lot of times throwing 1/2, maybe even 1 ounce. I do have 1 ounce weight. My cousin, Big Bait Baker, you guys have seen his channel. I've talked about it before. He's been in videos. He gave me a 1 ounce bullet weight, and I'll probably use that at some point this year. But bottom contact is a huge part of throwing these big worms. That's why I always throw heavy weights or, big bullet weights or heavy shaky heads. But these 3/8 ounce, if you're throwing a spinning rod, you can get away with these 3/8 ounce because the worm's heavy. That's what I've always done. So another way that a lot of people like throwing these worms is just with your standard Texas rig. Now, I sadly forgot all my bullet weights in my tackle box, but the type of hook that I use is something like this. Now, if you guys refer back to one of my older videos, I don't remember exactly which one it is, but I talked about the different style of hooks. There's like the longer, thinner wire hooks, more for, bigger worms like these and stuff like that. I talked about that, and then I talked about the shorter gap, like this one here is short, and thick wire, heavy gauge hook. Now, when I'm throwing big worms, I like having a smaller hook, but it's thicker wire, just because who knows, only the fish knows when that big one's going to bite. You can be sitting there and you can catch 2 1-pounders, and you're thinking, oh, maybe this hook is a little bit too heavy for them. Boom, you catch a 6-pounder, 7-pounder, 10-pounder. Who knows? Maybe a 10-pounder, maybe even a state record, world record. You never know. Is it raining? Sounds like it's raining. It's raining. That's odd. It wasn't even cloudy outside earlier. Anyway, but yeah, I like throwing these thicker gauge, shorter hooks. EWG always. I don't throw those straight bend hooks. I don't throw flipping hooks. I always throw EWG hooks, just like this one here. Also, I will throw something like this. I'm getting ready to show you now. A lot of people like throwing Carolina rigs. I personally don't, just because it is a very patience-oriented fishing tactic, and if any of you guys know me, I am not a patient person. That's why I'm a bass fisherman. I can't sit there and look at a bobber for hours waiting for it to go down. I can't do it. I can't do it. I either am bluegill fishing because the bass fishing sucks and I'm waiting for a bluegill to hit, and usually, I won't even bluegill fish unless I know I can catch one, or I just will start catfishing. I can catfish. I know a lot of people that watch my videos do catfish a little bit, and I can catfish. Catfishing is fun for me because you never know what you can get. I've caught bass, I've caught bluegill. My personal best bluegill was actually as I was trying to catch a catfish. So that stuff happens. But I'm not a patient person. That's why I hate throwing Carolina rigs. But the second best thing to a Carolina rig that I've started throwing here in Illinois, I've started throwing this literally like 3 days ago, and I've caught 4 fish doing it. So yeah, it is pouring down rain outside right now. That is weird. Anyway, this is something, if you guys watch, or if you guys are on my Facebook, you would have seen what I was using and stuff. But this is a 7/0 EWG swim bait hook. Super wide gap. You guys can see it's got probably a 1/2 inch between the actual bottom of the worm and the hook itself. You hear that? It is pouring rain. And a 1/2 ounce big belly weight on it. What that bait does is it sits just like this on the bottom. It sits just like that. That tail is sitting up in the air, and this thing has been getting the bites. Middle of the day, this is what I caught them on. The middle of the day today, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, this is what I was catching them on. It just works. Middle of the day, doesn't matter if it's middle of the day, evening time. If they just catch fish when you're doing this. I don't know why. I've never tried this before, but I wish I did before because I probably would have caught a lot more fish. The advantage of having a giant hook like this is a 7/0 hook. You'll see a lot of people out there throwing those giant owner hooks like the 11/0 hook with these 8-inch, 10-inch worms. And I've always wondered, why do you need such a giant hook? Because I always used littler hooks like this. This is actually a 3/0, but it's a short, and it's about the size of a 1/0, but it's a thicker wire. Now that's what I normally throw, but then you see people out there throwing 10/0 hooks on these 8-inch, 10-inch worms. I always was wondering, why would you have such a big hook? I've had a lot of luck with them smaller hooks. And I understand now, because when you're throwing these bigger hooks on these bigger worms, you'll catch a lot of those short strikers, because most of the time, something I've noticed is if I miss one, this was something I noticed back a long time ago, back before I was even making lures. I would catch, if your hook was sitting just like this, them fish would grab it right here. You guys can see where that like egg sac looking thing is? They would grab it right there, and then when you hook set, you'd either rip your worm where you just have this left, or you'd have a big tear right on the opposite side of your hook, right on this side of your hook. And I've always seen that, and I thought, hey, I wonder if I start throwing bigger hooks, will that help? And it does. Another great tip that I just realized that I hadn't said yet, for those guys who don't throw the bigger worms, the guys who throw, you know, little swim baits and smaller, you know, 4.5, 5 inch, 6 inch baits, you don't throw some of the bigger baits, wait a little bit longer on the hook set. Wait till you can feel it thump the hook, and when you feel it thump the hook, then you jack them, because that's when you know you're going to hook them. And so now, when I'm out there, I'm going to start throwing something like this with a big 7/0 hook, because it's basically right there where that egg sac is. That egg sac is right here. And that fish comes up there and grabs it right there. If he grabs it once, he's going to get that hook. And it's all over there. And when you're, as a fisherman, you always want to have the advantage over the fish. Now, that's not to say that fishing will be easier if you use a bigger hook, because, I mean, fishing is going to be complicated whether you're throwing a smaller hook or a bigger hook. But it's always going to add that little bit more onto your side over the fish, because you can catch fish bigger. So that's what I like to do with these bigger worms. Now, places I like to throw them, deep water. No shallow water. If it's less than 4 feet, I don't throw them in there. Just because I've never caught a fish on a big worm in less than 4 feet of water. I just never have. Most of the time, when I start throwing these bigger worms, I'll cast straight out in the middle. And I don't even know if there's actually structure out there or not. I'll just cast straight out in the middle, and pretty soon, about halfway through, I'll hook one and I'll catch him, and there you go. That's how you figure it out. Ledge fishing, any of you guys down on the Kentucky, the Tennessee River, down on Pickwick Lake, Chickamauga, any of those places, y'all know ledge fishing is a huge thing, and these big worms are very, very popular down there, and for good reason. They catch big fish. I've seen people catch, like, I think, who was that guy? I can't remember the guy's name, but he caught nearly a 45-pound 5-fish limit. That's only 5 fish. That's what, an average of 6 or 7 pounds, I think, somewhere in that area. Might even be a little bit more than that. That's an average of that size. That is a huge limit for any lake, but that's a big limit just for Chickamauga Lake, and that's what he was using. He was using I think he was using a 12-inch ribbon tail worm with a big hook, big weight on them ledges. They do catch big fish. Now, some of you guys may be, you know, intimidated by these bigger worms and think, oh, I'm not going to get very many bites. A lot of people will actually tell you that. You know, if you ever watch some of the videos about big worms, a lot of people will tell you you're not going to get a lot of bites, but you'll get a big one. That's not true. Don't believe that. Don't believe that, because, I mean, unless you're throwing like a 14 or 12-inch long worm, then it's a little bit different. But if you're throwing an 8 or 10-inch worm, I've found that you'll catch any fish. You can catch one cast, you can catch a 10-incher. Next cast, you'll catch a 10-pounder. It's very different. You'll catch small fish, you'll catch big fish, you'll catch medium fish, and in the same area. It doesn't matter. So if you're in an area where you're trying to catch a 3-pounder or 4-pounder in a lake full of 10-inchers, you know, you can still catch some of those 10-inchers, but you'll have a better chance at catching that 3 or 4-pounder on these bigger worms. So I hope you guys learned something. I hope someone learned something off this video. I wanted to do this video about 4 days ago, and I actually completely forgot. So yeah, I figured I'd do it now. So it's a little bit longer video, and I hope some of you guys actually stay tuned and watch till the end. Let me know if you did. If you did watch to the end, because someone's calling me. Thank you guys for watching.